Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Have you ever made anything fly?
Do you want to try it?
My name is Detective Hawthorne. I've been dispatched to follow up on a report of potential witchcraft at a bar a few miles away from here. May I come in? Where is it?
Ready?
Yeah.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Projection Booth. This is the second in a series of episodes where I am covering movies from the South by Southwest 2021 Film Festival. Up first, Elle Callehan's Witch Hunt, which is a film rich with metaphor. It's set in a world in which witchcraft is real and outlawed. As witches are women, it's about oppression as well as fear of the other. I had the pleasure of speaking to Ms. Callehan about Witch Hunt. You seem to have just an amazing background. I'm very curious how you got into filmmaking, because you've got, sound design, editing, just all of these different skills. How did that all happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up loving film, and I also kind of came about in the era where YouTube was starting. And so I just loved making little videos with my friends and putting them online, and people would watch them and get so happy. And I was like, I could do this as a job. I want to do that. And my parents were like, oh no. So I studied really hard, and I got into USC's film school and, moved across the country. And in film school, it was a lot of people that all wanted to be directors, and that was kind of intimidating. So I stayed in the editorial, post-production world. I studied sound design because it's kind of the most expensive thing I could play with at film school was the mixing board. I was like, I'm going to be in so much debt, I might as well get my money's worth. So I want to play with all these, people want to play with the cameras, and I was like, I want to mix. So I did that, and then I went into the studio system, and I was a PA and all various aspects of post-production, like stereo conversion, editorial, sound, VFX. And through doing that, I got to work pretty closely with some big directors because, it would just be, when you're on set, there's, hundreds and hundreds of people. But, when you're in editorial, it's just the director and a couple editors, and then the PA, which was me. I started getting really antsy to tell my own stories. And so eventually I left and started pitching to do my own projects.
How did Headcount come about? That
kind of grew out of I just wanted to tell some kind of story with a monster. I love monsters. So my friends and I were out in Joshua Tree, and it was just the weirdest looking place to me. And I thought it was so scary because you could see everything, but also you just felt so alone. And so my friend Michael Nader, who's an amazing writer, and now he's directing his film, The Toll, is coming out soon. He and I sat down, we wrote Headcount. We just set it out there, and then we, spent a couple years pitching to different investors and put the money together. And it came together as a true indie film. It's like everyone on the set was under 30 years old, just wanting to make a feature, tired of working in commercials. And we all lived out there for a month, and it was really fun. It was a really great place to, make your first piece of art.
Did that help open the door for Witch Hunt?
It definitely did, because, it was a genre film and I wanted to stay in the horror space. Also, just Headcount had such a small budget and it looked a lot bigger than it was. So it's a good pitch as a director when you can stretch your budget. And so I wrote Witch Hunt because I wanted to do something with witches next. And kind of the clout from Headcount allowed me to, find funding for that.
I mean, obviously the term witch hunt has been abused for the last 5 years, let's say. Mm-hmm. Was your film kind of a reaction to the political atmosphere the last few years?
It definitely was. And I didn't set out to really say anything political. I wanted to make a film about witches, and I wanted it to be a realistic film about witches because I'd seen witchcraft in all forms, I've seen it modernized, but like not really realistically. And I loved the series True Blood because it kind of handled vampires in a way that I thought is very accurate. Like that's how we would react if a whole race of vampires came out and said that they were real. And so I was like, well, what would happen if witches did that? And what would happen if that happened today? And so as I was writing, it just kind of like everything that was going on in the United States at the time just kind of bled into the script, and it all kind of found an organic story. I wanted to tell a story that revolved around mostly women for a while, and this felt a pretty natural place to do that.
Tell me about your cast, because I recognized a lot of the faces in there.
Yeah, I mean, they're an amazing cast. Gideon Adlon plays Claire, and she's a fantastic actress who just took the character and just made it her own. And I try to cast based on just like, who knows the character more than I do. So that they can just, I give them room to play. I want them to, make the role their own. Abigail was an amazing choice for Fiona, and she connected with the character a lot because I chose to make all my witches redheads to kind of have a physical representation of oppression too. Really connected about how, when she was growing up, she would get bullied for having red hair, and my sister, it was the same way, who I actually named the character after. So that was, I felt really good handing that character off to her. And then Elizabeth was a fantastic Martha. She's just so naturally kind and nurturing. And then Christian was an amazing villain. He just took it and ran with it. And it was just, just that kind of quiet terror that he would bring to every scene, and that control that I intended to have with his character was like, he just kind of represented, order and control, whereas the witches were kind of more like chaos and magic and empathy. And I think that dichotomy came out.
Not only did you direct this one, but you wrote this one as well. Did you allow people to ad-lib, or were you very strict as far as these are the words I wrote?
I always let them do whatever they want. I'm actually Christian and Gideon would rewrite a lot of their scenes with their dialogue. Same with Liz too. I was like, if it doesn't feel natural to you, if you don't think your character would say that, then they shouldn't say that. You know what they're like. And we stuck to the script for the most part, but we did rewrite a lot of scenes before we shot them in terms of their dialogue to just make it seem like more organic to what their characters were becoming. So yeah, I'm not precious with my writing at all.
Can you tell me about your DP? Because the film looks fantastic.
Nico, yes. He's amazing. And he was so meticulous with everything, and every shot for us was intentional. We tried to do longer takes and add movement because, if you're sitting down and watching something for an hour and a half, we want it to look pretty. That's kind of a struggle with indie films, is to prioritize that. But we really took our time and created something that's really pretty. I also love coloring things, have them be more saturated, even though my films are darker in nature. I like to make sure that they're very colorful because that's how I want to see the world.
Well, I will tell you, it doesn't look like an indie film. It just, the level of acting, the level of the way that everything looks, the way that it sounds, I can definitely tell that you took a lot of care when it came to the sound design for it.
Thank you. Yeah, I do sound design all my own stuff and I'm pretty meticulous about it.
What were some of your biggest challenges making the film?
There are a lot of stunts in the film, a lot of fire, like water, drownings. This is the first film that I've worked with that had stunts. And since I come from post-production, that's not something we ever dealt with. So that was a big learning curve for me. And obviously, these are things that you want to do safely. And so you have to do them very slowly. And so we had to change a lot of the coverage of some scenes because, we have to keep everyone safe, but we still want to do this big stunt. So that was, I think, my biggest challenge and what I took away from the film. I learned a lot about that, but I kind of got the bug for it. I want to do it more. They're fun.
When did you actually shoot this?
We shot it in June of 2019 because I was originally going to premiere at South by Southwest in 2020, but the world shut down, so it's been on hold until now. Did you just have to put it on the shelf? Pretty much, yeah. The whole festival circuit shut down, which is so important for indie films, and so rather than rush it out at a time where bigger things were happening in the world, we just decided to wait for the right time, which I think is now. Well, how did the pandemic affect you? It's been pretty isolating, I feel like maybe one of the witches in my movie. Cut off from society, hiding out. Creatively, it's been very interesting. I've been doing a lot of writing, and I'm excited to now, re-enter the industry with a lot of new ideas. But it does really put things into perspective, like what's important and what kind of relationships you want to prioritize. And my family lives across the country, so I've been pretty much alone in Los Angeles for the entire time. So I've learned a lot about myself, which has been, always nice. Do you think now you're in a position where the next film will be a little easier to make now that you've got 2 features under your belt? I would hope so. That's the idea. As filmmakers and artists, we just live to make our next project. So I'm hoping that, I can make something again soon. Have you been able to see the film with an audience? I haven't, which is a really interesting kind of new experience because especially genre films, the audience is such a big part of the viewing process. But at the same time, with everything being digital now, you can reach a much wider audience. As a filmmaker, my only goal is to just entertain people. The more people that can see my film and enjoy it, hopefully, the better. I'm going to miss hearing people screaming because there's a lot of points in Witch Hunt where you just go jump and gasp and not having that laugh afterwards with the rest of the theater. I really miss watching people squirm. I always sit in the back so that I can see if scares are working, so that if people are slowly getting more hunched over. But I'll get to hopefully soon. What kind of stuff have you been working on for the future? More creature features. I'm really into that. I'm a big folklore buff. So I've been creating a lot of new monsters and figuring out what kind of stories I want to tell in this kind of new world landscape that we're going to be entering. Personally, I didn't watch a lot of horror during the pandemic because the world was just so crazy. But I was able to write a lot of horror. So I'm hoping that, now that we're coming out of it, we want to be more entertained and have a kind of diverse palette of what we want to watch. You get to unleash your monsters on more people. Yeah, exactly. Are you out on social? Is there a good place to keep up with you in the film? I'm on Instagram. It's just my name, Elle Callehan, and I usually post on there. Next up, Paul Dude's Deadly Lunch Break. It's a comedy about the titular Paul Dude, that's D-O-O-D, who's played by Tom Meaton. He's a middle-aged man who lives with his mom and wants to try out for a show that's kind of similar to Britain's Got Talent or one of those. Unfortunately, things don't go as well as they should, and he's beset by petty bureaucrats, overzealous sushi shop owners, a lascivious priest and nun, and other nasty characters. It's a comedy mixed with a little bit of horror. Director and co-writer Nick Gillespe told me about the long journey for Paul Dude to come to the big screen. Nick, you have done a lot of jobs. I see you working in camera, DP work, just a whole bunch of stuff. How did you get your start?
I picked up an old Panasonic M10 VHS camcorder when I was about 10 years old that a family friend had bought for a wedding. There was a tape in it, and I pressed record, and we were like kids playing, and we made little films, and I just fell in love with that and making pictures, and I did it as much as I could. And then I suppose I made films, and I started putting them into little festivals. When I got a lot older, I got a job in local television as a camera operator, camera assistant, camera trainee on some BBC sitcoms and dramas, and worked my way up from that. But always at the same time carried on shooting my own short films, music videos, and writing as much as possible, and just kind of doing that, I guess. And it's don't know where it will go to, but it's I feel like it's early days.
How did you finally work your way into directing?
Made my short films. I'd done a bit of telly and some promos, and I'd always wanted to make a feature and make as many more features. And I guess just writing, really. Writing, I sent a script to Finn, who produced this film, and he liked it. And Matthew White, who wrote Paulie's Daily Lunch Break originally, sent me it in 2010. We'd just done a couple of short films, which had done quite well at festivals and things like that. And we wanted to make a feature. So we kicked this around for years and years, really. And sort of 11 years ago, from start to, it's not finished yet. The film's finished. I don't know what the life of it would be, but yeah, I just really love making stuff and working with like-minded people who enjoy making films, and that's what I like. That's what I like doing.
So Paul Dude's Deadly Lunch Break, that is 10 years in the making. That's amazing.
Yes, 10 years, I think. And Matt had probably had some ideas about it before that. It's a long time, but I think there's a lot of films that take longer than that to get made. So it has been there for quite a long time. And it's been one of those projects or scripts at least, where I've always just gone back to. And Matt and I have got a bunch of feature scripts that we've been developing, and that one it kept coming back. We were like, what about Paul Dude? Like, what would? And I think at the point when it was originally written, it was at a time when talent shows in the UK were sort of, they've always been there, but they were sort of they were reaching more mainstream primetime TV, and I think that was something we chose to tap into at that point. And 10 years later, it's still the case, really. So it's a project that's, for us personally, that's kind of stood the test of time.
How has the project changed over these years?
The original idea of Matt's was a school kid who was being bullied in high school when he stayed in a small town, and everyone went off to have various jobs and whatever and carried on bullying him, and eventually flipped one day. And that was more of a sort of horror film, I suppose. And we've seen that one quite a lot, and revenge stories. And then we worked the talent show thing into it. Lots of details, really. The core sort of backbone of the story and structure, I think, had mainly stayed. And it's always been a film about kind of grief and loss, and finding amusing comedic moments in possibly some of the darker sides of what happens of life. I'm not talking about laughing at bad things or anything, but I think it does tread that kind of tightrope. So it's a lot about the development of finding the balance of that, and kind of making Paul three-dimensional, and making sure that people would root for him, really, I suppose, when he goes to make the decision to do the things he does.
Can you tell me a little bit about your cast? I mean, some of the faces in here are just fantastic. I was very happy to see people like Johnny Vegas, Catherine Parkinson, some very familiar faces to me. I was just tickled to see them.
I mean, we're so lucky, really, with the cast that we got. And it really, I mean, started by just initially approaching people that we knew, because it's, trying to be realistic and who we're going to get. And even the people that we got and people that we knew, I thought they might still probably not going to want to necessarily do it. But once we got a few people on board, and we had a script that we were all happy with, I think that more people kind of came to it, and it grew. And Johnny Vegas, he's a lovely chap, and he's a very he's got a lot of depth, and he's a very talented actor, and he's a stand-up comic and a very well-known face here. But I think as an actor, he's absolutely fantastic. And he was one of the initial 2010 sort of actors that we knew at the time that the part had been written for. It got developed. But And then Tom Meaton as well. I'd worked with quite a bit in the past, and he's got a real range, and he's absolutely lovely. But on screen, there's a sort of danger to him as well, and he's a very good talented character actor. So it was finding people that we knew, and then suddenly we were on set, and I was surrounded by all of these famous faces, and I thought, wow, this is real.
Had you directed comedy before this?
I worked on a lot of comedy shows and shot a lot of stuff as a DOP, and my short films have always had an element of comedy to them. I can't sit here and tell you that I think my work's funny or that I think the film's funny. There's things that I found funny on set that other people didn't, and vice versa. I've worked a lot on it, and I guess worked on a lot of taster tapes, I think, for comedians, as much as enjoying working with comedic actors. And I suppose, again, I'm not an expert on comedy, but I can say that there's a difference between being funny with your mates down the pub than there is to perhaps doing a stand-up show or something. I think it's a whole different ball game.
You do such a great job of balancing kind of horror elements, the murders or the fantasy murders in the case of some scenes, and then the comedy. You tread that fine line very, very well.
I guess it was about the balance and getting that right. And I actually reined some of the deaths in a little bit, and it's like any script, really. You can have like 1/8 of a page that sort of says a little bit of something that can become a 2-week shoot, or you can have like a big gory scene written on page, and then when you really start to imagine what that will actually look like, there's a fine line. And I think that a lot of the gore in the film is done in a way that it is all quite heightened, and it is all a bit larger than life. So that was the intention, and my hope is that some people will be shocked by it, but I would hope that some people will find that darkly amusing as well.
When did you actually shoot this?
The film was shot in 2019 in autumn, in October and November in autumn 2019. And then we finished it, just before Christmas, had a little bit of time off, and then we kind of started our edit, which kind of got shut down, and we were unable to continue in March when the UK went into lockdown. So we continued working remotely, which was a whole new, for everyone, as much as just the world, the feelings that we all had at that time of unease and uncertainty, and then trying to find new ways of working and new ways of communicating. So it was a real challenge. And, I love what I do. I feel very lucky to be able to do it. And it's hard work, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. I'm not saving lives. So I understand that, the importance of that as well. And we inadvertently made a period film, because there's actually a scene with a gravestone and it says 2020, and it's sort of set in autumn. So we made a small inaccuracy there. But it's crazy, how much the world has changed and will continue to change, pandemic or no pandemic, as a filmmaker. So you sort of have to do your best to adapt to it. And we could never have predicted what would happen, I don't think. But getting through it, cracking on.
I am very curious how that post-production during pandemic actually worked. I mean, obviously a lot of Zoom meetings or FaceTime kind of thing, but how did that workflow go as far as doing all the audio and all the video and just all the editing and all the stuff that goes into post? Because you also had a lot of effects in there too. Yeah, so you're exactly right. I mean, it was all done remotely, all done over Zoom and phone calls. I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to various HODs and things, and working from home, just constantly working at home, being at home and keeping safe. I think, there's no end of like people trying to suggest at times we all get together in a room, and we were able to do it remotely, and there's a way that works really. And I actually I shot a film in August last year. I came out of lockdown and shot what I was told was the first feature film in the United Kingdom to go in its entirety, which was a film directed by Ben Wheatley called In the Earth. So that was something that made I was able to pay my rent basically and carry on. But wonderful experience. But like anything with COVID, there's a whole added layer. Yeah, I take it quite seriously, but there's a worry, I suppose. There is definitely a
sensibleness that needs to be adapted.
Is South by Southwest the premiere of Paul Dude?
It's the world premiere. So it's a very, very special thing to have our film playing there. And it's really great that there's an online festival that people can enjoy films and carry on watching new films. I hope we'll get back to cinema. I hope the theatres will open. I hope I can go to gigs again. I hope all that stuff will happen. But I think it shows really that the film industry and the exhibition of films is still possible. And I think as much as I'd love to be in a room with a load of people that, some I might know, but mostly strangers and have a nice time, the main thing is that people see the film, really. It's will have a life of its own. And I've always wanted to go to South by Southwest. I've dreamt of it. So ironically can't this time, but I'm there in spirit, definitely.
So you haven't seen this with an audience, then? You haven't heard people laugh at the film necessarily?
It's really strange this time. Yeah, we've not been able to have a cast and crew screening or anything like that. There's a couple of people that have seen it and people working on the film. So that's they've all been very supportive, but you don't, of course, you don't get a clear idea of what people actually make of the film until an audience see it, until a public audience see it. So yeah, I'm very nervous about that, but also genuinely, it's great that the festival will take us on and will show it. And I hope that the film, I think the film is full of colour and it's fun. It's dark at the times, but I think in everything that's happened, I hope people will find this film and they will find something fun with it. And there's a lot of heart there, and I hope people will not immediately relate to it and say, "Oh, I remember when I went and did that," but find something that they can get onto that they find entertaining.
Well, you treat Paul Dude so lovingly, you could easily make him the butt of the joke, but I don't think that you ever really do that.
No, he's not the butt of the joke. He really is. He's a kind of he's an underdog, and he is a victim of circumstance, and that he's got a dream. He lives a fairly sheltered existence, for want of a better term. He's his mum's carer. He earns a living. He works part-time in this kind of bric-a-brac second-hand type shop. And he's a very sweet individual who loves singing and dancing. He just likes that. And people take advantage of him and people bully him. And I think that's wrong. And I think that's where I hope, that's where I got behind the character, definitely. So that, when he goes through and he goes and does these things or tries to do these things, it doesn't go particularly well for him. But I hope that people are on side with him for that.
Nick Gillespe, thank you so much for your time. This was a real pleasure talking with you.
No, thank you, Mike. It's been really, really good questions. Thank you.
Going from comedy with a bit of horror to a full-out horror film, Offseason, that's all one word, is from director Mickey Keating of Darling fame. I don't want to say too much about it other than it's a nightmarish vision of an off-season town where our main character, Marie Aldrich, who's played by Jocelyn Donahue of The Frontier, which we talked about way back in 2016, is beset by potentially supernatural forces. Let's go ahead and hear from writer-director Mickey Keating. Can you tell me how you became interested in being a filmmaker?
I've wanted to make movies since as long as I can remember. And before I knew how to make movies, I wanted to be Indiana Jones or, Han Solo. And so it was kind of a natural. There was never another option. And so when I was like 8 or 9, I found the old family video camera. From there, it was, nonstop ever since. So I kind of just see this as one long ongoing path.
Did you end up going to school for film, or did you just jump right in?
I did. I went to Boston University, and I studied film there and English. So it was cool. It was like a best of both worlds kind of thing.
Can you tell me about some of your early films, what they were like, and were you always interested in horror as a genre, or have you tried other things?
I've dabbled in everything. Growing up, I was, when Lord of the Rings came out, immediately I was like, well, I want to make Lord of the Rings. But horror has always been my focus. Genre films, crime movies, like that's always been my real obsession. I'm a huge cinephile in general, so I love everything, from the dumbest comedy to, to anything really. I've always been kind of anchored in like movies that are gravitate towards the darkness, I suppose, even though I'm a very happy person.
One of the films that I've seen of yours, Carnage Park, I like that there is that mixture of crime and horror inside of that. It's I love cross-genre stuff like that.
Oh, cool. Yes. No, I mean, I absolutely... If I'm not, I think my next movie that I'm going to do is a straight crime movie. So I'm very, I love combining those genres. And obviously Scorpion Joe and Carnage Park was, the all-American hero you love to hate.
Is Carnage Park, is that an homage to Punishment Park?
Title-wise, yeah, for sure. And I guess subject matter, obviously it doesn't have any of like the Peter Watkins documentary, pseudo-documentary stuff. But the idea of people traversing the desert, being hunted by military folk is obviously, a huge inspiration. And I love Punishment Park.
Where did the idea for Offseason come from?
The two anchor points that I can definitely say are William Faulkner's short story, A Rose for Emily, and then Shirley Jackson's story, The Summer People. Like that kind of those were the jumping off point in terms of like literature or cinema that I really was inspired by when writing this. And, but then also simultaneously, I grew up in Florida. I had been to these little towns that like were completely empty that used to be these tourist hubs. And so it really was something that had been in my brain, and in my psyche for years and years and years before I finally committed. I was like, this is going to be the next movie and I'm going to film in Florida and we'll see what happens.
It seems like you did a lot of night shooting for that.
Yeah, and we shot a lot. We designed the movie. I drew the whole film out on storyboards before, and we designed the movie for night and magic hour as much as we could. So, yeah, there was this element, this mathematic element that went into shooting this one, which was great. Shooting in Florida, presents all different kind of difficulties when it comes to weather and whatnot.
Even having to shoot near the water, I was like, wow, that's got to be a challenge.
But it was glorious. It looks amazing, and it was really magical to film. But we endured everything from high winds to bugs to endless bugs. Let's be real about it, to the little sand gnats. And then sometimes it would rain, sometimes it wouldn't. We got really lucky with like the overcast look of the movie, fortunately. But yeah, it was in LA, it's like every single day is exactly the same to an extent, unless you get a little rain. But I think the whole crew coming from Los Angeles, it was a learning experience for everybody.
Can you tell me a little bit about your crew? I mean, especially your DP. Like I said, it looks gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I worked with Mac. He's my cinematographer. This was our 6th film together, and we decided from a very early phase that we wanted to film with these old anamorphic lenses. We had the luxury of being able to go and scout this movie twice before we filmed because the production company financed that. And so we were really able to plan out and map things out in a more detailed fashion than just showing up and being like, oh, I hope this works out. But yeah, I mean, Mac, I can't sing his praises enough. And his team, Edgar the Gaffer and David, his first AC, we've worked on 4 or 5 movies together at this point. So it really is a very close-knit family.
When did you actually shoot this thing, and how has the pandemic affected you, if at all?
We shot it in January and February 2020. And
wow.
Literally like a couple weeks after we wrapped, the whole country ground to a halt. Val, my editor, and I, we lived together, and so there was this element. We take a while on our movies. Usually independent movies, they're like 10-week deadline, then we have to see the director's cut, whatever, But this movie, we were like, well, the future's uncertain. It's kind of a race to nowhere, so let's take as much time as we want to on the film. Let's screen it. Let's see if we we have to. The one difference is, we like to have people sit down with us and watch it and feel it in the room, because you can very quickly get where places aren't working. And the learning experience was we couldn't do that. We had to show it on links, and hope that we could also feel the cringiness of early edits. But it was really fortunate because we were able to take as much time as we wanted. And then when we found out we got into South by Southwest, we were like, oh no. And we had to race to finish everything else.
What were some of your biggest challenges with this other than the pandemic?
It was extremely, for all of the factors that came, maybe it was because I planned the movie and I had the movie so long in my head before we shot that we were able to take most things in stride. The one shocking thing that happened that has never happened to me on far smaller movies was we were about 3 months into the edit, and all of a sudden this brand new, beautiful hard drive that we were using as our master drive just died at 3 a.m. as I was working on sound. And I do a lot of my own sound design. And we all of a sudden just like Val came in, it was 3 a.m. She pulled everything from the drive onto the desktop of the computer. And we waited in like horrible anticipation, because if that had completely wiped clean, I would have lost like 2 months of sound work. but it all worked out. Nothing happened, but it was just ironic that my biggest film had some kind of magical hard drive fiasco that fortunately ended up okay, but it was very, very scary. It was at least 2 sleepless nights.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine that. Just, wow. That's one that I can feel in my soul.
Yeah. The crazy thing was I was watching, because all I do is watch movies when I'm not working on the movie, on a film. And I was watching Keanu Reeves' side-by-side documentary, and they were interviewing somebody about digital and how the problem with digital is all of a sudden the hard drive can just go tick, tick, tick and wipe clean. And I was like, yeah, right. That never happens. A week later, that's the exact thing that happened to us.
I have to tell you that the sound design is gorgeous. I watched it with headphones on, and it just was amazing.
Cool. Great. Yes. Thank you. I always lay the base layers, and then I use my same collaborator from all of my films, Sean Duffy, and he really, I like to say it's like I draw the sketches, he makes it a painting. And he really put a lot of work into that. And he's worked with, over the years, like he's worked with Joe Begas, and he's worked with a whole bunch of other filmmakers. So I feel very fortunate. I always say it's like when my collaborators keep working, they just keep getting better and better, and then I benefit.
What was it like working with Melora Walters?
I mean, it was a dream. It was an absolute I never thought in a million years that she would do the movie, because she's been in so many of my favorite movies. I think she's an absolutely astounding actor, and I begged her. I met with her once. We talked about it. We talked a lot about Faulkner, and I basically was like, please, there's nobody else I want to cast in this movie, please. And she did it, and she was lovely. And, she really brought it to, especially the flashback sequence. It was her idea. She's like, I need to be the wicked mother, so everyone feels horrible for Jocelyn's character when she's trapped. She came here, and she's trapped here now. And I'm just like this horrible, wicked mother. And I was like, that's brilliant. Let's do that. And so it was really, really a fruitful collaboration.
Some of the close-ups in the movie, they're shot so lovingly. It just looks so good to see these folks' faces on screen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Cassavetes says it the best. It's like the greatest special effect is the close-up of an actor's face. So, why not?
When you're in that post-production phase and you have to send out the links, how are you getting your feedback on that stuff? Because you're not able to sit in a room or sit with an audience and see this.
I'm very lucky to know a lot of really great filmmakers who I trust. So we would show them the movie, and then I'd get on the phone and we discuss, or, I showed, obviously like someone like Mary Herron is a huge hero of mine. And she was so sweet to watch the movie and send me, all of her thoughts, very helpful thoughts, as elegantly written as they could ever, as any thoughts could ever be. And Larry Fessenden is another person, and filmmaker JT Petty. So, you get on the phone and you kind of discuss it, and you definitely don't feel it so much as when you're watching it, but you definitely do get the sense. I was a lot more worried about the process, but it actually turned out to be not hugely detrimental to our creative endeavors, fortunately.
Did the movie change a lot during that post-prod period?
It's funny. It's a movie like Carnage Park. We did a lot with the structure after the fact. This one was so designed in pre-planning that there wasn't an incredible amount of dramatic changes. But you get the sense always with first cuts, it's like where something goes on too long, where something could be done, a little bit better or more creatively. And so it really was helpful to be able to show something that was design, because if someone said like, wow, the second half of this movie really doesn't work, it would have been a huge problem because it was very designed, very specifically structured and designed. So unfortunately that didn't happen.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it did feel like the movie does take a turn halfway through, and I was kind of delighted by that. I really didn't expect that it would suddenly shift like that for me.
Yeah, great. That's great. Yeah, I get a thrill when they're, where you're watching a movie, you're like, where the hell is this movie going? And it goes somewhere completely you don't expect. And and the effort really was to, it's like this poor character is just spiraling deeper and deeper into this nightmare, and this sort of, it was really, a fun experience, but also, something I was very cautious of creating. When you create nightmare logic or nightmare scenarios, you have to think it out and design it. Otherwise, you can't just lean on the fact, well, it's a dream. She's crazy, because then the audience will riot, right? So it really was that kind of effort to keep everybody guessing, but to also not throw too many wrenches in the dreamlike structure or take too much advantage of the dreamlike structure.
I didn't think it was a remake of Carnival of Souls, but I was feeling that same kind of uneasiness while I was watching it. And then when you made that shift, I was like, oh, he's going in a different way than I ever thought this would go.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. And I think that those movies and, something like The Twilight Zone or something like the Faulkner story that I mentioned, like those are all things that like you try to, because I feel like audiences are savvy now, right? And I want to be able to keep them from looking at their phones while they're watching my movie. And the way to do that is to keep throwing, left-hand turns at them as much as you can.
Well, yeah, it's got to be really difficult with this being an online festival that you have to worry about people looking at their phones, where when they're engaged in the theater, there's much less of that.
Sure. But I think alternatively, I'm my generation and the generation coming up behind me, we're used to having our movies, the reality of it is my movies have gotten theatrical releases, but by and large, they're mostly found on these streaming sites, like Netflix or Amazon Prime. And so there is a kind of a natural acceptance of being like, I hope one day the movie gets seen in the theaters, but premiering this way for South by isn't the complete Brave New World that it might be if I was used to the complete theatrical release and not the day and date experience, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. And yeah, I think that's really, well, especially in this environment, that's just the way that it's going to be. And in 5 years, who knows what it'll be like.
Yeah, well, I'm optimistic. I really hope that, because there's one side saying, oh, the pandemic has killed theaters. But I think that once this is under control and the vaccinations are available, to everybody, I think that the theaters are going to come roaring back, because the reality is people are going to want to get out of their houses. People are going to want to go do stuff on Friday and Saturday nights. And so I feel very hopeful that the theaters will survive and that hopefully Offseason will get a chance to play that way.
During this time, have you been fully invested in Offseason? Have you been able to work on pre-prod for your next film?
We worked on Offseason for months and months and months. And then I went to Chicago and I shot a little movie with Swanberg again. It was completely, under the context of everyone lives in a mask for a month. And, it was a really kind of wild experience to learn how to film a movie again, under these brand new situations. But then when I came back, the minute I came back, we found out we were in South by. So like that movie, we aren't even finished assembling yet. So now I get to dive back in, which is a nice thing to have, really, because releasing a film it's stressful, and you're shoving the baby out of the nest, and we'll see if it flies or not. So it's nice to have something to take that stress away.
Mr. Keating, is there a good place for people to keep up with you and your work online?
I have an Instagram page that I update sometimes, but I'm not really that present, unfortunately. So, interviews like this are the best opportunity, I think.
Good luck at South by Southwest. I hope that a lot of people get to see this, and I'm very curious where it goes from here, because I hope a lot of people see Offseason.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Last but not least on this episode is a documentary about the case of Reality Winner. I had forgotten about Miss Winner's case way back in 2016, 2017. She leaked a document about foreign interference in the 2016 presidential election. You know, the election where one of the candidates was openly begging Russian hackers to hack their opponent's email.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Rather than creating a lunatic 2-hour quote-unquote documentary, Ms. Winner thought she would not be found out. But the organization she leaked the document to pretty much raised a big old red flag to the government, which promptly arrested her. She remains locked up to this day. I spoke to Sonia Kennebeck about the making of The United States versus Reality Winner and how important it is to tell this story. How did you get involved with filmmaking and especially into documentaries?
I actually had a bit of an unusual route into documentary festival films, I think. I never went to film school. I've never even taken a filmmaking class. I studied international politics, international affairs politics with some focus on security policy. I always wanted to be a journalist. So I actually, identify very strongly as being an investigative journalist, and I focused on national security issues. So I actually come really from the content of my films. And then I worked in broadcast and I did investigative pieces. And when I, found my, my first subject for my first feature film, National Bird, which is about the U.S. drone war, who is a drone program whistleblower. She's such, like a fascinating, person and character. And I thought that, this has to be a full film. I didn't want to be constrained by sort of the broadcast formats. And so I just really, without really knowing too much about film, I made that first feature. It ran very well in festivals, and I just really got hooked to the medium. The beauty of the layers of film and storytelling, the educational value when you do a social justice documentary. Just the power of reaching people. And like so viscerally through film is so beautiful.
How do you decide what you're going to cover? How do you find your subjects?
Because it takes so long to produce an independent documentary film, I like 3 years, full-time work, usually at a minimum, from the idea to the release, in particular for the types of films that I do, which are highly investigative. All of my films are based on original research and really, very research intensive. I sometimes say, like, what you see in the film is like the tip of the iceberg. Like what is underneath it is the work that, the reading thousands and thousands of pages, court papers, and and talking to many more people who actually than who actually appear in the film. But in order to embark on such a journey and dedicate, so many years of my life to a subject, it really has to interest me personally. And I'm really, honestly, very interested in national security issues and stories. So all of my films have been, in this kind of subject matter. The first film was about the U.S. drone war. The second one, is about a very unique story. Matt DeHart is his name. Enemies of the State is the film, which is kind of, about, in large, it's about a case of of what his parents say is a hacktivist and WikiLeaks courier. And then Reality Winner's case really, that to my production partner and I really stood out as a story that had to be told. It really, the fact that this young whistleblower released a document about foreign election interference and then, gets charged with, under, the egregious Espionage Act. And while she's in jail, from the day that she, they interviewed and interrogated her, the FBI, and she was arrested, facing 10 years in prison. That to us was like, it is such a historical case. And we thought like, no matter, what other films we're working on, we have to document this case. It is of such a value, for our democracy, and people have to know, Reality Winner's story.
When I first saw the name of the documentary, I had forgotten about Reality Winner, the person, and I thought you were going for a reality TV contestant. So I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, no, it is. The reality TV contestants are not my type of films. Yeah, it might be, important for people who have not been following her case that, to know that this is, her actual name, Reality Winner. And, when the story first broke, a lot of people thought this was, a code name or it had like a different meaning. But Reality Winner is a person. She's currently in prison, right now still for disclosing one document about foreign election interference. She has had a very, very difficult time in prison. We're talking to her family, and they have a clemency petition going for her. And it's really the way that she has been treated is, disproportionate, compared to many, many other cases of mishandling, classified information, disclosing information to the press, government information. It's been arbitrary, the way the government has been, prosecuting whistleblowers.
How was Reality Winner's family when you approached them?
My production partner and I heard about, Reality Winner's case, on the news, and we immediately paid attention because national security whistleblowers are extremely rare in society, because the stakes are so high, and on the other hand, national security whistleblowers over the past, 2 decades since 9/11 have disclosed some of the most important, revelations about government misconduct, government torture, mass data collection, surveillance, drone warfare, and now, foreign election interference. But they are, treated so harshly. And so when, her case became public, we immediately, discussed it. And then my production partner, Ines Hofmann-Kenner, said to me, Sonia, you should actually fly out, and to one of her pre-trial hearings. So I flew out first without a camera and, just to be a witness. And I was quite surprised how few national journalists were covering, this important case. And I met, Reality Winner's mother, Billie Winner Davis, and, talked to her about my previous work on drones and drone whistleblowers. And it turns out that Reality Winner actually, was in the military as well and worked with drones. So her family watched my previous film, and they just felt it explained so much about their daughter. They really identified with, the lead protagonist in National Bird. So after that, the access was, quite immediate, and we really got a lot of behind the scenes access.
One of the most interesting people that's in the documentary for me is Edward Snowden, and I'm very curious how you made that connection with him as well.
It was very important to us to, speak to other whistleblowers who've been through the same pressure and being charged, under the Espionage Act for espionage. Edward Snowden, of course, still being in exile in Russia, is, facing it's, a terrible situation, every day himself, where he can't, return to his own country. So we reached out through his attorneys. We have a lot of contacts in common. I've covered national security for quite a long time. It really took a while. He's very selective. Ed Snowden's very selective and cautious about, who he gives interviews to and, what type of, talks he participates in. But yeah, eventually, we got access, and it was an incredible interview. I think he feels very personally, emotional about Reality Winner's case, and he felt it was very important for him to speak out for her.
So did you actually have to go to Russia to shoot him?
Yeah, my director of photography and I, we went to Russia to interview Edward Snowden, and everything had to be perfectly, sort of choreographed and organized. And I have to say, it felt incredible to meet a a person, a whistleblower who has made such a difference, for our society and informing us about, what we now take, as granted, and we know that, how much data is being collected and used. And I actually see a very strong connection to my reality winner film, in the sense that, Edward Snowden disclosed this, mass data collection. And what we see in Reality Winner's case is how the government was using all this information that is available to build a case against this young whistleblower, and, using all like text messages between her and her sister, like very, very private, sort of joking, like messages between sisters to build this case against her, or even diary entries. They took excerpts from diary entries and, and tried to, like make a case, against her and, like about her character. So it's very concerning.
Not to sound trite, but it sounded very, very 1984 for me.
Yes. And it like doesn't immediately, make you feel, kind of cautious, about what you, say to friends or your family, like in very intimate personal manners, this like, all this information we share, especially at a time like now, during a pandemic where we can't meet in person. So, digital communication is becoming much, much more important. And we share such personal information with our family. We should, privacy matters. So I really hope that people, also are educated about this in our film. And in fact, what I really hope is that they don't take the approach of, censoring themselves, but actually sort of push for privacy protection and changes. Because we don't want to live in a world where we can't, share our most private thoughts with our own family. We don't want that. We need privacy protection. We need safeguards. We need constitutional protections that are enforced so we can, have a functioning democracy.
How many films do you have in the hopper at one time? How many films are you working on at the same time?
With United States versus Reality Winner, I basically almost parallel was working on two feature films. I was working on Enemies of the State at the same that was very challenging, to be honest. We are a truly independent film team. So, every dollar we spend, we have to raise the money for. And especially during the pandemic, it's been extremely challenging for independent artists, to raise money to do this type of, research intensive work. I have more ideas than I can make. I constantly, I see so many stories that I think have to be told. I wish I had, more time and, to be honest, also a lot more money, to maybe, work with other people and getting these stories out that I think are so important. It's certainly, I think it's, to work as such a small crew on two independent features at the same time. That's like stretching it. But I have probably around 3-4 ideas in pretty advanced development. So I really have to make a decision on what to really focus my time next.
You mean people aren't out there just throwing money at documentary filmmakers?
No. And please, if any of your listeners want to, donate to our, important journalistic social justice work, they should come to me. I'm on social media and we have a website, codebreakerfilms.com. Independent documentary film is very unsustainable. Some of the most important reporting has come out of, from independent documentary films, but people really don't realize how challenging it is to make a living and fund these films. And filmmaking is expensive. Even, we worked on, what is kind of, is a shoestring budget, but it's if you want to make a certain type of quality films, you have to do, professional post-production, you need certain cameras. It's a very challenging industry. And if you have, I do think, documentary films are bringing out some of the most important information. I have so many friends who do like amazing social justice documentary work, and everyone is honestly quite, struggling.
You brought up the pandemic, and I'm curious, how did that affect the making of this film for you?
As a film team, we were quite fortunate because most of the filming had concluded prior to the pandemic. We had worked, very hard on two different independent feature films, and we were just filming a lot in the years prior to the pandemic. So we could really use the time to organize the materials and continue fundraising and go into editing and so on, and to really make such a film that goes into these type of festivals and has a life way beyond the festivals. It takes a lot of time to think through and plan and structure and the research and the fact checking, which I really focus a lot of time on. These are films that are, all based on original research. And that is, to be honest, like one of the most time consuming things in my work.
I remembered Reality Winner once I started watching the documentary, especially when the Seth Meyers clip came up. I was like, okay, it all clicked into place. It took me back to such a horrible time of 4 or 5 years ago. Stuff that I think I've tried to push out of my brain. So having this film to remind me of when Comey was fired, when the Reality Winner story broke, the reaction of people to it, I think a lot of us have tried to induce ourselves into amnesia for the last 4 or 5 years.
I know exactly what you mean, especially because there's like so much going on now, in the news cycles. And there was like the reporting on the Trump administration, and it was like just one scandal after another, right? And then of course we are in an information age where things, come from all kinds of different directions, and the new information is taking over. So I actually really also saw this film as an opportunity to take a step back and really reflect on that time period. And yes, my production partner and I were always like discussing how this film is, maybe one of the first films that really reflects on, one of the, negative legacies of the Trump administration, which was really going down harshly against, whistleblowers and information and the press and the media, going down against, information about foreign election interference. And it was really important for me to bring these news clips and these like important, speeches and so on into the film for, to tell people, like, not just remind them of what happened, but also, maybe inspire people to take a stand and make sure this is not going to happen again. And we also have to reverse course on some of the things, like, imprisoning a whistleblower who disclosed information about foreign election interference. That's what our democracy is based on, right? If we don't have fair, safe, secure elections, like how can we have, a strong democracy? And same with, a free press and transparency. How are we going to keep our government in check if there's no way to report on government misconduct safely without endangering whistleblowers? Like these are issues. They're not just affecting journalists and impacting us. It's about, all the citizens in this country. Don't you want to have, information about your country and your government?
Do you already have your next project in mind?
I have always multiple projects sort of I'm thinking about at night, go on in my head. I sometimes get up at night and write ideas down or think through scenes. I have a few fiction film projects in mind. One of them is actually based on a true story, and it's actually it kind of falls into the scope of my work. So I'm very, very, interested and intrigued by it. I'm really interested sort of in all forms of films, and I would love to explore the fiction landscape as a director.
Sonia Kennebeck, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Thank you. And thanks like also for your interest in my filmmaking is like really like, I always have the feeling with, the types of films that I make, because they involve such, timely current affairs subjects, and that of course should be at the center of it. That's why I make these films, but it's also nice, to have an opportunity to talk about the craft itself. Because my team, I think I have like a fantastic cinematographer, Torsten Lapp. Like he captures like in a documentary, space where it's so quick, you can't just tell people to do things. Like he has such an eye for just beautiful, meaningful images, it's been I've worked with him on all my films. So Torsten Lapp is really like such an artist. And then my editor, like, I don't know if you've seen, National Bird or Enemies of the State, but they all have I work with the same team, but they all have very different styles. And so for United States versus Reality Winner, my editor, Maxine Gödecke, she developed this like collage style that, she mapped out, with like all these like, social media tweets and, social media posts, but also Reality Winner's artwork, where we really wanted to get across her character, because she's an absent character. It's so difficult to make a film about an absent character. And so we wanted her to be at the center of this. So we went through, of course, the voice interviews with her, but also her artwork, her like drawings. She's a great artist, like her diary entries and her sort of like style a little bit to get her personality across.
The documentary had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. So thank you so much for making it.
Thank you. This is really meaningful. Like, yeah, it's like, thanks for reporting on it. As you said, and thanks for asking about it too. This industry is like, it's very challenging, if you're not like an independently wealthy person. So I do appreciate your interest and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I'll be back again tomorrow with another bunch of reviews and interviews from South by Southwest 2021.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.